Reviews podcast, where I review the movies I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And, chasing the nostalgia dollar in entertainment is nothing new. Some of you are probably too young to remember, but back in the 90s, there was this desire to remake every old television show into a new feature-length film, because they were cashing in on the nostalgia of our parents. And yeah, we got some good things out of it. There was, of course, The Addams Family with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. Both those movies were amazing and launched Christina Ricci's career and are also responsible for Wednesday Addams being at the center of all Addams Family projects going forward. There was The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, which is still an awesome movie. So some of them worked, but others obviously didn't. For every one of those, there was a tired remake of The Flintstones or The Honeymooners or, all these other things that just didn't click. So now we're kind of in that same bubble, only different. Now we're doing legacy films where we're bringing back original cast members to either be in the next phase of the franchise or revive their characters decades after the original had hit, And again, sometimes you get some great stuff out of it. You get the third season of Star Trek Picard or Cobra Kai. But more often than not, you get Jurassic Park Rebirth or The Rise of Skywalker. So it's always a crapshoot. And I have to admit that when I saw they were doing a sequel, a 40 years later sequel to This Is Spinal Tap, I had mixed feelings, because Spinal Tap is one of those truly unique and influential movies that people don't talk about as much as others, but its impact cannot be denied. So once again, if you're too young and you've never seen This Is Spinal Tap, first of all, you need to do that. You need to go and do that right fucking now, because that is one of the all-time great comedies. And you might not truly understand how influential it was. So, for those who don't know...
Picture it. Sicily, 1912.
And what makes you the ancient history expert?
I was there.
This Is Spinal Tap was done in the 80s by director Rob Reiner, who also did things like The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me. I mean, the guy is a truly legendary director who, again, doesn't quite get the credit he deserves for how influential he's been. And there were two things that made This Is Spinal Tap stand out. Number one, it was one of the first really mainstream mockumentaries. So those films that are done in the documentary style. Basically, if you are a fan of The Office or Parks and Rec or Abbott Elementary or any of those types of shows, you owe a debt to This Is Spinal Tap, because it was one of the first to actually bring that style of comedy to the mainstream. So This Is Spinal Tap tells the story of a director doing a documentary on a fading rock band called Spinal Tap, who are about to go on a tour of America after the release of their latest album, their kind of last-ditch attempt to bring their stardom back. And there's not really a fully structured plot. It's more just a series of incidents and things that happen. The other major thing that sets Spinal Tap apart is that there's no script. This series of films follows kind of the Commedia dell'arte style of, you have a scenario, you have a basic, this is the story that needs to be told, and in these scenes, this is the information that needs to get across, but the actual dialogue is all ad-libbed and improvised by the cast. So not only is it a mockumentary style, but the very off-the-cuff nature of it gives it this air of realism and sincerity. So much so that there are people, I have heard, kind of like a War of the Worlds thing, that see this movie and for large stretches of it don't realize that it's a joke, and they think it's a real documentary because it feels so real and true to life. And the funny things that happen are maybe not laugh out loud or instantly funny, but they're funny when you kind of think back to them. It's a very interesting form of comedy, and it is just one of these films that is so amazingly subtly funny. And of course, it led also to the Christopher Guest, who plays Nigel in Spinal Tap. He and Eugene Levy would then go on to do a series of these mockumentary style films in the 90s and into the 2000s. Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, Mighty Wind, and For Your Consideration. And once again, I put this out there. If you are a theater kid listening to this, if you believe yourself to be a theater person, you need to go see Waiting for Guffman right this very second. And you really should watch all of those movies, because they are master classes in improv and going with it and character development and feeding off your fellow actor and taking the things that they come up with on the spot and working with them. You need to go watch these movies, and they're also just funny as hell. So anyway, I give you all this backstory. I give you all this, this history lesson because I want to make it clear why I was at the same time hesitant, but also kind of hopeful, because this is done by the same group of people, which of course our Rob Reiner is directing it and reprising his role of the fictional film director, and Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer are all reprising their roles, and anybody who's still with us from the original has a guest appearance. So it doesn't feel like it's one of these studio mandated things where, kind of like bringing back everybody from Jurassic Park for Jurassic World, Rebirth, one of these weird, we don't have a real story to tell or anything good for these people to actually do that makes sense, but they're here. But again, you wonder, can that style of comedy still exist in today's world, where you have had things like The Office and Parks and Rec? So I came at this as both a fan and someone who's just seen a lot of these things really fall flat. So what is the end result, you might be asking, after all this time of prep? The end result is I was pleasantly surprised. The film is delightful and a lot of fun. It's a film I find that it's difficult to review by its very nature, by the fact that it is there's not really a strong plot. The basic framing device is that Spinal Tap's new manager, who is the daughter of their previous manager, found that they had one last live performance on their contract and has decided to execute it. And so Rob Reiner is going around and documenting the putting on of this kind of either comeback or farewell concert, depending, because Spinal Tap is always kind of fading in and out and coming back and surviving. One thing about it I can say is I find that unlike a lot of these other legacy films, let's go get the original cast together for one more romp, is I think by the very nature of the setup, it actually fits the formula a lot better. You know, I love Rocky Balboa. You know, it's probably my favorite Rocky movie, but you do have to kind of get over the idea that this guy is going to get back in the ring and box again at a professional level at his age. You know, that is, and I understand that is like the thrust of the movie, that's the entire point of the film, but it is something that's kind of hard to really believe. However, with Spinal Tap, I mean, we still see it. A lot of these older rock bands are still touring, and they are still coming back together. I mean, how many farewell tours have the Rolling Stones done at this time? And also, you know, behind the music style documentaries of Where Are They Now, and look how this old rock star who was all about sex and drugs and rock and roll back when they were young, now they're, you know, running a bait shop. So the setup of their world really does feel natural when you go and you see that, you know, Christopher Guest's character is running a cheese shop, or Michael McKean's character is writing, you know, music for hold menus and podcast themes, or that Harry Shearer's character is running a glue museum. I mean, these things are funny, but if you watch those kind of documentaries, you see they're not that far out of the realm of possibility. That's also been one of the biggest strengths of these films. Spinal Tap, Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, Mighty Wind, they all have very esoteric subject matter. You know, community theaters, dog shows, folk music, life on the road of a heavy metal band. These are all things that, you know, not a lot of people know about, but the people who do know about them really know about them. And you see that the creators clearly love their subject material, and they're not, this is not to me like, say, Blades of Glory, you know, the figure skating movie that basically makes fun of male figure skaters. These are films that acknowledge the weirdness of these little isolated worlds, but also understands that that's kind of why the people who engage in them love them so much. Waiting for Guffman is one of the only movies I can think of that is about a community theater trying to put on a production. And yes, you can laugh at how overly serious these small town would-be actors take everything. But as a community theater director and actor myself, I can totally see myself in it. And they also get the passion for it and the desire for it to be good spot on. With striking that perfect balance of, yes, we're poking fun at this, but we also are doing it with love. You know, it's kind of the same thing I talked about with The Naked Gun. Good spoofs, good parodies are things that say, we love these things, not in spite of their idiosyncrasies or in spite of their logic jumps, but we love them because of it. And you can tell that that is very true. This is not a mean-spirited movie. This is not making fun of rock stars who are past it and are still trying to go out there and do it. It manages, like all of the others, to be simultaneously funny, but also a little sad and a little heartbreaking. You know, that is a difficult balance to hit. And I think this is, again, where we have to get to the heart of it. What really works about these movies? First of all, the cast. This is, these three guys, particularly Harry Shearer, Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, they are the godfathers of this type of comedy. And I think with the exception of Waiting for Guffman, they're in all of the other ones. I don't think Harry Shearer is in Best in Show, but Michael McKean is. And they are the very, very best at this. These are the masters of improv and the masters of working off one another. They do so in such a natural way. And you also get the feeling that they're not trying to be funny. If you go and see an improv show, often some of the issues you have is that the people are trying to be funny and trying to make every joke land instead of actually building off of what the other actor is giving you. And these guys, at least in the stuff that ends up on screen, they don't have that problem. But that, again, that's the other secret, is great directing. Because you question, how do you direct a movie like this? Well, you direct it by editing it, and you direct it by cherry picking out the good stuff and using it to form a narrative. And once again, Rob Reiner is a phenomenal director. And in those other films, Christopher Guest is a fantastic director. They will both say, if you listen to the audio commentary on these, that they'll say, we had hours of footage, that we shot and just let the cameras roll and filmed it like a documentary, just let everybody talk. And then we had to go out and pick the funny bits to kind of form a narrative. That takes time and energy, and that is hard to do. And like all masters of their craft, Rob Reiner does it and makes it look easy. Because there is a very easygoing feel about this. And that is exactly what made any of these movies successful and good, is that they feel easy. They feel smooth. I also gotta give big ups to some of the celebrities. There's a lot of celebrities kind of pop in and out of this. They do a bit. One of the running gags of Spinal Tap is that their drummers always die in these, horrific ways. So there's kind of a Spinal Tap drummer curse. So they're, of course, going around and trying to recruit a drummer, and they talk to Lars Ulrich and the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I can't remember his name. Sorry, I'm not a rock music aficionado. So they have some cute cameos, but the great cameos belong to Paul McCartney and Elton John, who don't just kind of pop in and kind of sing a song with them. They actually interact. And these are not two guys that you think of as actors or improv artists, but they come up with some pretty funny lines, and they're really good to have on screen. It was so cool to see Paul McCartney and Elton John in this. They did a great job. I also want to say that of course you get like I say, they bring back everybody from the original that's still with us. Fran Drescher has a quick cameo. I was so happy to see John Michael Higgins, who is now doing great with voice work, but he did a lot of those Christopher Guest movies. He was in a lot of them. He and Michael McKean played lovers in one of them. In Best in Show, they played a gay couple. So it was great to see him pop in and do a cameo. But one of the things that always strikes me about these movies is how incredibly talented our three leads are. Not just for the improv they have to, but they're also incredibly musically talented. Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, and Harry Shearer wrote all of the songs. And they wrote all of the songs for all of these movies. So they wrote heavy metal music for Spinal Tap, which also included their entire discography. So they wrote 60s Flower Children music, and and have an evolution of the band. They wrote all of those songs. For Waiting for Guffman, they wrote community theater musical music. For Mighty Wind, they wrote all of the songs for all of the different bands, again, through various points in their careers, to give them the legitimacy that these are bands that have been around forever. And they're all great songs. It's great music. Matter of fact, Michael McKean was nominated for an Oscar for Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, which he wrote for A Mighty Wind. So that's one thing that's always just baffled me about these guys and all the people who do these improv movies, is how multi-talented and knowledgeable they are. It was good. I have to say the MVP of this movie has to go to New Edition Chris Edison, who I don't really know of, and his filmography on IMDb is not the most extensive. But he is clearly having the most fun with the ad-lib improv nature of the film. And in a lot of the scenes, he's the one who drops lines and just comes up with shit that you can tell that the other guys were not expecting. And you can tell because they go quiet and there's this dumbfounded look on all of their faces for like a minute before they can kind of figure out what they say in response to this. There's a moment where he comes in, they're practicing for the show, and he's coming, and he's like, all right, I'm leaving. You know, he's the new publicist. He's like, I'm leaving. You're on your own. He's like, but you said you were going to be here. It's like, well, I have to go meet my birth mother. You know, family has to come first, guys. There's more important things than rock and roll. And he does it so straight-faced, and the other actors, you can tell they were not expecting that. And they were just like, okay. He also, during some of the outtakes that they put at the end credits, he has like the funniest line, the line I laughed at the hardest. Like I actually had to stop and recover because I was laughing so hard, I was getting lightheaded. I'm not going to try to recreate it for you. Go watch the movie. Maybe you'll laugh at it, maybe you won't. But he clearly was having the most fun and was also kind of throwing the monkey wrench into it a little bit, which is what you should do in a film like this. So yeah, he was great. If I have nitpicks, there are a few things that I think were not as strong. Obviously, this is not as good as the original. Nothing can be. So, I felt like this one had a couple more cinematic moments in it, which undercut the mockumentary style of it. For instance, at the very beginning, Rob Reiner is giving his intro mirroring the one he gave at the beginning of the first movie, and he's leaning on a stack of folding chairs, and at the end of his speech, the folding chairs all topple over in a very sitcom-y way, and he responds to it in a very sitcom-y way that felt very out of place. There's another moment towards the end where Michael McKean's character storms out. Of course, they have the rock and roll breakup again, all is lost moment.
The all is lost moment.
And he goes out walking the streets of New Orleans, and the fact that there's a camera in front of him as he's walking, and one that goes with him that he doesn't acknowledge, and he stops and listens to some blues musicians, and it makes him flash back to the first movie. Very cinematic. And that did not gel with the rest of the very mockumentary, very real, grounded filming of the rest of it. And I think these movies particularly only work when that mockumentary style is really upheld. For instance, the weakest of all of them for me was always For Your Consideration, which is funny, but it's not as funny as the others because it's not done like a documentary. It's not filmed in that we're catching people kind of off guard. It's filmed like an actual movie, and so therefore the improv and loose nature of it doesn't fit. It doesn't feel natural, you know? I also feel like this one spent a little too much time referencing the first. And it's okay that there are callbacks. For instance, anybody who knows the original knows that one of the funniest and kind of most identifiable moments with that is when they try to do their musical number Stonehenge, and they want a huge set piece, but the person building it misunderstands the measurements, and they get like a little tiny one, which leads to some of the funniest lines and some of the funniest moments in the film.
I do not for one think that the problem was that the band was down. I think that the problem may have been that there was a Stonehenge monument on the stage that was in danger of being crushed by a dwarf.
There is a payoff to that, which is wonderful. It's great to see. But there's also a lot of moments where they're too busy calling back to what happened before and, referencing it again. And I think they could have steered away from that and just let it be on its own. I know that sounds dumb because obviously I think the audience for a Spinal Tap 2 is the same audience who saw Spinal Tap 1. But if you are trying to get some new people interested in this type of comedy and these films, and maybe get some eyes back on these older films, I think letting it stand on its own, as being able to come in and see it and go, okay, it's a movie about aging rock stars coming back. I think you can relate to that. You don't have to keep calling back to the original. And I do feel they do that a little bit too much, to the point that it's jarring when it happens. But those are minor quibbles. On the whole, I had a good time with this. I laughed at it. Again, it bears the brunt of being a sequel to a comedy classic. Kind of like, I know these ones were made one right after the other, but City Slickers 2 can't hold up to City Slickers 1 because you just can't. And by that same logic, Spinal Tap 2 can't really hold up against Spinal Tap 1. It's fresher, it's funnier, there's more to it. But I think for what it is, I think it was a pretty good film, and I do think it's one of the best of these original cast reuniting, all these years later for a sequel type of films that we get these days. I do think it's really good, and I think if you enjoyed the first one, you'll enjoy this one. If you enjoyed the Christopher Guest movies, which have their following, you'll enjoy this one. And I think maybe if you're a new fan, this could be a gateway into those movies. I think you can enjoy this. Understand, if you're going to be a new fan and watch this, that these movies are very different from other comedies. These are not big set piece, huge joke, loud shouting, clever turn. These are not those types of films. Like, even if you're coming at it from a a standpoint of you were a fan of Parks and Rec or The Office for some unknown reason. These films are in those veins, or rather those are in their vein, but these films are a lot more subtle. The characters are not as cliche as some of those. But I do think that a new generation can get a kick out of this and maybe come to see these other forms of films and these other forms of comedy. And I would love to have that happen. I don't know if I'd want more of them, but I would like the other ones to have an audience again. And if there are new ones that kind of are still in this vein, why not? Let's give it a shot, you know? Yeah, I think you could only benefit from this type of comedy having a resurgence. So, yeah, so there are my thoughts. Okay, I think that's everything I need to talk about. I think that's everything I wanted to mention. So let's do it. So final grade for Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. I'm going to B+. I'm going to B+. It's not an A. It's not the original. It's not Waiting for Guffman. It's not Mighty Wind. But I think it's close to Best in Show. I think it's in there. It's still funny. It's still, I want to watch it again. It's still a good movie. So, yeah, solid B+. I enjoyed this one. So check it out if you can. All right. So, that is it for this one. So, as always, thank you for coming along. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the views on YouTube. Thanks for all the listens on the various streaming platforms. Again, I said this at the end of the weapons review. I know that seeing 12 people listen to a podcast is maybe not the biggest number in the world, and it's not, compared to these other ones that have millions upon millions of followers and listeners, but those 12 or whatever listens or views, those mean the world to me. They really, really do. So please know that you have my true and heartfelt thanks for listening. So yes, thank you all very much. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.